Hello. Thank you very, very much for joining us, everybody, this evening. My name is Ian Harkins. I've been a tutor with Appleruth for a decade now, which thoroughly dates me, even as I say it. In my time as a tutor, I have covered such APs as all of the history ones, the politics and government ones, and a lot of the language and a lot of the foreign language ones as well. And joining me today is my colleague Jesse. Jesse, would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Sure thing. So I'm Jesse Anderson Lehman. I've been with the company for a little over 8 years, tutoring SAT, ACT, a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, for the APs, my sort of primary area of focus, AP Physics, AP Chemistry, AP Stats. I have other experience with some other sort of more STEM-related APs as well, AP Computer Science, AP Calculus, that sort of thing. So yeah, kind of offering more of the math and science end of things for this webinar.
So hopefully between one of us, or between the two of us, we'll be able to address any specific questions that you might have. So we are going to be recording this session. We're going to be having an opportunity for questions towards the end of it. But Jesse and I are going to offer some thoughts with some prefabricated questions that are some common FAQs that we get constantly when we do these sorts of things. So hopefully that'll give you all an opportunity to address what you were thinking about beforehand. And then if there's anything more specific that we can help you with, we would love to. This should go for an hour. So I think with that, let's get this show on the road. Who are we? We are Appleruth. We believe that when you change students' self-beliefs, you change their lives. And how on earth do we do that? We do that through the three prongs that we offer: academic tutoring, test prep, and executive functioning coaching. And it is that second circle, test prep, that brings us to our first question today. This is probably the biggest smoke signal for help that we get. I'm not taking enough or taking too many APs. Now what? This often comes to us when students are already in the middle of the academic year, and either they're freshmen sort of getting used to high school rigors, or they're juniors who are really in the trenches of all of this. So, and we get this question about how to balance the ideas of which APs to take. Jesse, I'd love to throw this question to you first, because I get it all the time. What do you think? Like when someone comes to you with, I'm taking too many, I'm not taking enough, what do you do to guide somebody through this conversation?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, it comes down to the fact that, like, first, you're kind of governed by what's available to you and what's reasonable in your schedule. And you're also governed by the fact that, like, when colleges admit somebody, they're admitting a person. They're not admitting a collection of achievements that's on a list that you need to make sure the list is as long as possible. So, am I taking too many APs, or am I taking enough? Really, on either end, the thing to ask yourself is, like, what am I interested in? What are the things that that kind of define me as a student? What are the things that fit into my sort of area of focus? And then what are the things I'm really ready to commit to? Because, like, you're not just like taking a test. You're taking a class in most cases. You're committing a large portion of your sort of schedule to that class. You want to make sure it's something that you're interested in. You want to make sure that it's something that you are going to be able to put the time toward. And then when it comes time to take the test, you take the test, and in a lot of ways, what you're doing is you're signaling to colleges what you're interested in. And so for me, that meant that I took a lot of math and science oriented APs. I also took, AP Lit, AP Lang, APUSH, AP US History, Microeconomics, Government. I took a lot of APs because that was kind of what I had available to me. But, the sort of thrust of what my application looked like was really within the sort of core group of AP Calculus, AP Chemistry, AP Physics, AP Computer Science, the things that I was most interested in. And that was what I incorporated most into my applications when I then was, writing a sort of statement of purpose of why I wanted to go to a certain school or what I was interested in. And so if anything, I look back on the number of APs I did, and I think I maybe was on the high end of what somebody might choose to do. I think that, the once you have your core group of APs that you're really focused on and that you care about, that starts sending signals about who you are as a student and what you're interested in. But yeah, what do you think about that, Ian?
I think that's an amazing answer, and you hit every single point. That's excellent. Yeah, I think there's three things, and tell me if I'm echoing what you're thinking, but there's three things that sort of leap out to me when this conversation comes up, which is one, I think you're very, very correct. This is an opportunity. The APs are an opportunity for you as a student to signal to a school what it is that you are interested in studying. And I would say that if you are preparing a college application and you are going to say, boy, I sure do love engineering. I live and breathe engineering, for instance. And you haven't taken a single STEM AP when your school does offer it, I think that would cause some raised eyebrows in an admissions office. A second thing that might determine it is, what does your school actually offer? Harvard very openly says on their admissions website, when you click on their information thing for APs, like they want to know, have you taken advantage of the academic opportunities that were at your school? And so they understand that not every single school will offer AP everything. Like there are 38 AP courses, and yet I assure you, there are not that many classes available in anybody's high school. Like that number will fluctuate massively. So I think that, if they see you taking an honors course and you are trying to make that work for an AP, again, in order to say, this is something that I'm interested in, well, that says something. And then I think as well, it does depend upon your schedule, your commitments. If you are, a classic example is if you are a very dedicated athlete, I happen to work with a lot of athletes. If you are a dedicated high school athlete looking to continue that in college, and that has taken up so much of your time, then it is going to be a challenge to find the studying time to take 5 APs your junior year. I don't think that that's reasonable. I think it might hurt you. So please remember that grades in your transcript are always going to be the number one thing that colleges and universities look at when they are trying to evaluate you academically. This is just another indicator that you can give them. So again, I would ask yourself those questions of, what do you actually want to show that you're interested in? What are you telegraphing that this is the kind of stuff that I would like to continue to study? What can you handle in your schedule? And what does your school actually offer? Are you taking full advantage of the courses that are available in your school? I hope that was a thorough enough answer. What do you think, Jesse? Have I left anything out possibly?
No, that's good. No, that's absolutely right. Because that question of like, if I take another AP, I'm not going to be able to continue in band or in orchestra or in something that I love. That's a trade-off that, if that's something that you want to be part of your life as you go on to college, and it's something you want to be continue to have be part of your academic experience, then giving it up just to take one additional AP is perhaps going to be counterproductive, and it certainly is not going to give you a pleasant experience as you go through your junior and senior year in high school either. So
I will also say one other thing before we move on from this. I do also work with plenty of seniors who are taking APs. These are seniors who are already committed to going to a certain school. By this point, maybe. And they're doing it because they want to have college credit. I mean, that is ultimately the point of an AP, is that it gives you college credit. And I will say from my experience, I actually did take, back in the day, 5 APs, and they together gave me enough college credit that I actually could graduate in one fewer semester than everybody else. Saved me tuition for that semester. It's great. So that's another possibility to think about when you're trying to evaluate how many should I take. I think that's enough time on question 1. We need to get through the rest of them. My goodness. How do I know if my AP class is on track for the exam? Jesse, how do I know if my AP class is on track for the exam?
Well, so okay, this first things first. I mean, huge props to all AP teachers. I mean, taking on an AP class when you're a teacher in a school is a big deal, and many different teachers follow many different paths, and there are many different paths that get you to the final goal. That being said, we definitely get a lot of students who come in, at some point in the spring, and we'll start talking about what they've gotten through and what they haven't gotten through. We'll start taking a look at what the AP exam kind of has to, what's listed for the AP courses in terms of content areas. And we will find that, sometimes their teacher is not as far along as we would hope they would be in order to have the amount of time for test prep. Because that's the thing, is like some AP teachers will approach it more as learning the material, which is wonderful. But other teachers are better about viewing it as like we're preparing for a test. And certainly when we get called in as a test prep company, among other things, but as a test prep company, we're making sure that you're ready for that test and that you're going to be ready for the exam. And so one of the first things I do when I start tutoring a student is I will go on to AP Central, I'll go on to College Board website, and you can see a list of all the units, all the chapters, as many as there are, and it varies from class to class, 12, 14, however many units there are. And you can see kind of, which ones you've checked off and which ones you haven't. And ideally, for most AP teachers, they're instructed to kind of go through in the same order. And certainly in the STEM subjects, this is the case. And in most histories, I would say, because you're kind of working chronologically, that you can kind of see okay, if I need to get from here to here, and right now I'm here, you can kind of see okay, are there a few chapters coming up that if I want to be a little bit more comfortable in test prep, I should start getting a little bit of a sneak peek at those. Or also, I mean, a lot of the time when I start going over that with students, they start realizing just how much they've learned. And that anxiety that they had about oh wow, I've got so much more to do. It's well, actually you've tackled over half the material that you need to, and we can pick up from there and do a lot with what you've already got. But yeah, I'm a big believer in College Board has resources that are available, easy to find, that can already put you in a position of understanding kind of where you are situated in terms of where the class is and also where you want to be before the exam comes up.
Again, Jesse, great answer and good shout, telling people to go straight to the source, to the College Board website, because it's all there. You can see the packet that they distribute to all of the AP teachers. They will give a very specific, this is the course that we expect, and when you cover such and such a topic, this is what we expect students to have learned. I'd say as well, along with that, they are very liberal now. It's not at all difficult for, most people will be taking written tests. So it's not at all difficult to go on and find a PDF example of these tests. They keep decades worth of banks of questions. So it's very easy to go back and see okay, I know I've just studied the Industrial Revolution in AP European history. Do I have anything to answer this DBQ about the Industrial Revolution that I could think of? Let me see what they asked in 2006 on the free response question. It's there. Something else I might say, this is, when we are approached now, and this is a good time for people to start approaching us. One of the things I would point people to is take a mock test. Why not? It will give you an indication of how well you know the past stuff, and yeah, how much more there is to go, but you will look back and say, my goodness, I've actually learned a lot. That's really good. And if you need to go back and remember something from perhaps the very beginning of the year, I just wrote this in our newsletter, like if there's something that you need to look back on, again, for AP Euro, that is like 1415, the Merovingians, like you can do that. And this is a good time to start tackling that. Jesse, again, have I left anything off, man? Or
No, I don't think so. I will just say, right,
I
like,
must be really good at this then.
there,
If
no,
I'm
I mean,
yeah.
I'll just say that, like, I mean, teachers are our partners in this, right?
Yes.
They're our allies. And so, you know, and I'm embedded in a high school. I teach every single day. My wife's a teacher as well. And so uh, the other thing to do is, like, you know, talk to your teacher, start the conversation, get a perspective on where they are in the class, and what, you know, they're the ones who are also really well equipped to tell you what you've done well and what you may need some more work on. I find that tutoring works a lot better when I'm able to be, you know, following the same path as what a teacher is suggesting than trying to be something that's completely separate and completely outside of what's happening in the classroom. So, you know, and that's a good lesson for high schoolers to learn too, is like, talk to your teacher, start that conversation. It shows maturity, and it shows, you know, a desire to do well, which can also help your grade for that matter. So
Yeah. Hey, Jesse, how should I plan out my study? I'm loving this because beforehand,
after figuring out our stick,
I was gonna give like 2-word answers and throw the rest to you, and so I'm actively preventing him from doing that because he knows too much. Jesse, how should I plan out my study program?
I mean, again, I'm a big fan of going straight to the source. I'm a big fan of having College Board kind of up and ready. The other resource that we'll often use are Barron's guides. They're very good at kind of filling in gaps, and they're the ones that we tend to recommend. The other options are good too, but Barron's is kind of the one that Appleruth is most commonly working with. Get a look. You know, I will often, on my very first time I meet with a student, I will, like, open it up on Zoom. And the great thing about Zoom is that you can annotate, right? So I'll literally have the page open and start annotating, checking off about, here's this, here's that, here's what we've felt better on, here's what we haven't. And then once you have an idea for the content areas that that a student is feeling a little bit weaker on, and how much content there might be to cover, that's where you start laying out a study program. Sometimes it's just spot checking. Sometimes it's a little bit of everything, right? Like, sometimes it hasn't been a clean path, and sometimes there's a lot to go over, and that gives you an idea of how to lay it out. You take that, you divide it out among the number of weeks you have, you add in a couple for safety, and you start taking practice tests. I mean, really, practice tests are worth their weight in gold. This is true in all forms of test prep, no matter what, but in APs as well. You know, finding a multiple choice set of multiple choice questions to look at, so that you see what your coverage is on that side of things. My favorite place to go for that is I'm giving away all my tricks, but is to go into the AP course packet that's given out to teachers, that has, like, usually like a 20 question or so multiple choice chunk that you can kind of go through. And then, yeah, like Ian already mentioned, I mean, so many free response questions from previous years. Every single year they're published, they're available, they're freely on AP, on College Board, not just for students and teachers, but for literally anybody, any member of the public who wants to go and look at them. And you know, once then you start that process of, you know, if you see how you do on the multiple choice, see how much you want to improve, see how much of a gap there is from where you are to where you want to be, and then start practicing free response and getting used to how the free response looks. And also, I mean, again, showing off the tricks. It's like, I love showing students what the scoring guidelines look like, so that they know, like, when a grader looks at this is what they're looking for. Start guiding your study toward that. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. I think it's on a later slide.
This feels like as well, like a good moment to talk about, you know, again, because I tutor them, I'm more familiar with some of these humanities ones, but how should I plan out my study program? I'd say there are also, Jesse, you're sort of getting at something that I always feel is really strong. And there's 2 prongs to answering that question. I feel like there's what we've talked about mostly, which is how am I doing with the material? Like, do I remember everything that we started talking about in October? And how much more do I have to catch up? If we're going through for an AP chemistry, we're going through the whole periodic table of elements and we're still on carbon and it's February. Oh no, there's a lot of other ones to get to. I'm kidding, but you see how I mean about thank you. Jesse's laughing. That's the best
Computer
feedback
humor, man.
Sorry, I'm being a real boron here. But, um, it's sorry. But it feels like, to me, the other, so there's that, then the other side of it is what you're talking about, like the way in which the AP asks its questions, which might not be how each teacher asks theirs. Like, for instance, for the Spanish language, you have to answer an email in writing. Like, what a strange exercise. Like they'll ask you some sort of academic writing thing, and you have to respond in the form of an email. So you have to know how to properly address an email, depending on if it's respectful or if it's to a peer, and how to sign off from that email. You have to be very familiar with sort of reading comp. Which in and of itself is like this. So, for anybody who's done SAT, ACT study with us, like we get into the weeds of reading comp. Try doing that in a second or third language. And then, if you're doing the speaking part, like you have to very awkwardly, no one's there with you, but you have to sit with a very uncomfortable microphone, like this far away from you, if you're using one of their old headsets. It's really, it's a strange feeling to suddenly pretend like you're in a call center or something and be trying to give an answer that's going to get you a grade and be evaluated by somebody who's going to listen to this recording weeks from now. That is in and of itself part and parcel of what you've got to do. You have to be very familiar with the way in which they ask the questions, and you have to be able to recall a heck of a lot of material. So those are the two things that I'd start planning for. If your teacher is doing a lot of if your teacher is giving tests and quizzes and homeworks that are formatted according to this, fantastic. If not, that's something that you can gear a study plan more to. And I'm sure you can reach out to your teacher, who'll be more than happy to discuss that. But those are the things that I think. Jesse, am I missing anything from how to start thinking about planning out the study program?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's some of it is basic test strategy and your comfortability with testing broadly, but then a lot of it is the specific things about what's so weird about AP. And yeah, sometimes classes tack very closely to the way the AP exam is structured, and sometimes they don't. And that's an area to check and make sure, because that's you're absolutely right. That's the thing that can vary off of just pure content knowledge, is like also making sure you're prepared for the test itself.
Yeah. And another thing, while I'm up on this soapbox, part and parcel of the study program is just keeping in mind this is going to be your March, your April. And I know a lot of people have athletic commitments come to mind, especially if you're doing one of the spring sports. So this might be something that you want to start doing even now in February, while those commitments might not be as stringent, so that you can get into a good habit and maybe get a lot of this done and under your belt, so that you can then, I'm not going to say cruise or coast more, but that you've done a lot of the work and that a lot of that is going to be easier for you once you get into the last few weeks of May. they're out with the schedule as well. Find out when your test date exactly is. Like, is it the first few days of May, or is it, because there's this 2 week period, and those extra days can make a difference. So make sure that, make sure you know what day it's on as well. I think, yeah, I think I've answered everything I need to in this
Good.
question.
Yeah.
What about you, Jesse?
No, that's good. Yeah, that's absolutely
Good. I'll move on from my chemistry jokes. Outstanding. When should I start reviewing with a tutor or on my own? I will take this question, Jesse. You've spoken for too long, sir. March is very common to start. February is better, especially if you would like to work with somebody on the content. I do final reviews for a couple of the histories. I do the AP Euro and the AP Global. Is it any surprise to anybody with this accent that I do those APs? But I will do in sort of mid-April a final review on those. And for the most part, at that point, I am focusing on the specifics of formatting and expectations and last-minute study tactics. I am not doing ladies and gentlemen, sit down, as for the next 2 hours, I bring you through everything that you need to know about European or global history. I cannot be like that scene where in The Matrix, Keanu Reeves gets plugged in and like winces for a second, his eyes open and says, "I know Kung Fu." Like it can't work like that. So if that's something that you are more concerned about, that's something to start tackling even now, especially if you want to remember all of the first semester stuff. Something that can happen as well is that, depending on the timing and what everything else has been going on in school, some teachers will realize they have to sort of race through some of the last things on the course, especially for the histories. Jesse, you can tell me if that happens for the STEM subjects as well. I know for me, it felt like it happened back when I was a student for the AP Calc one that I did. Like, I felt like I never understood polar coordinates like in my life. Like it's a joke. I don't understand how suddenly you draw a straight line and it becomes a flower. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But that was something that was crammed in sort of 1 week. Like literally, all of a sudden I've been working with a Cartesian grid, and all of a sudden there's another grid and straight lines bend in on themselves. Like, what is this? And I was asked a question on it on my AP when I did it, and I didn't even try. I couldn't answer it because we just hadn't had the time. I drew a smiley face for the answer with a little speech bubble saying thank you. Hopefully I made whoever that graders was day. But that is, that's something as well to sort of start predicting. You can tell now, like, where am I in the course? But enough from me. Jesse, what do you think?
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's like, we offer these final reviews. I would strongly encourage. I mean, I think they're a great resource. I work on AP Stats, AP Chem, and AP Physics. But the reality is absolutely like that. At that point, I want to be making sure that we are tailoring responses to what is being expected from the AP exams that we're working on the test at that point. Content stuff, you want to get started on it a little bit sooner. We just can't. I mean, it gets to a point where you just can't cover all the material in too short of a period. And so getting started early is best. And yeah, there is that phenomenon of kind of accelerationism at the end is common across all the APs. I mean, some of that's because teachers are trying to hit the center of mass. So there's a lot of things that happen. They're like the odds of you getting a polar coordinate, like a whole polar coordinate free response question, are low enough that there's some stuff at the end that they can maybe have be a little bit quicker. But if you want to be fully prepared and you want to make sure that you've got that, then again, making sure that you're ready for what that's going to look like, knowing from your teacher like how that's going to look and what you're actually going to what you're on track to talk about, whereas what might have to be left by the wayside is important. And it's also true that teachers who are more on top of it will be really good about the few weeks leading up to the to the exam, making sure that that is really dedicated exam prep time.
Yeah.
Teachers who are really on top of it and who give that time at the end of class, and that lines up with our calendar very well. What we recommend is like those last few weeks should really be about getting ready for the exam. You should try to tackle any big content gaps before then.
Amen. Jesse, tell me how, because I struggle with this one as well. How do you handle the balance that I think is important, that you're reviewing past material, but also sort of acknowledging you still have quizzes and new material coming up that you've got to learn that's affecting your grades. Like I sometimes feel, to some students' detriment, that rather than working with me and sort of doing review, learning how to answer these questions, I'm sort of called to say like, oh, so and so, little Timmy's got a quiz coming up on Friday, and it's about the the Gilded Age. When do you have free that you can quickly go over that era with him? And I'm happy to do that, and hopefully that reinforces that stage and stays with you. But it's not, it's not what I really aim to do, which is to get to the point where we are just, drilling AP question prep. Which I don't know, like, it certainly is important to get a DBQ on the Gilded Age correct. But what do you think about that balance? Because I even now, 10 years on, I sort of struggle with that myself when I'm working with students.
Well, yeah, you're right. There's a balance there. And if you're reviewing on your own, it's a difficult balance to hit. I try to make sure that I'm keeping track of where kids are in their class and how they are doing in their class, to make sure that if there's something that we can spend a little bit of time on to tackle, I'm more than willing to do that. But you're right. Like, ideally, we want to be in a position where we're able to kind of review things holistically, review things en masse, and be able to kind of get on that ramp toward what the exam kind of looks like. So it's tough, but I mean, that's also one of those things where if a student is struggling with that balance, then certainly having a tutor, somebody like us, who has a little bit more experience and can help, even just like cherry picking, making sure that we're picking free response questions that we are practicing with that go back, but also free response questions that are timely, and also making sure that we don't throw something at a student that is a week before they've actually learned it. Like that balance is something that I absolutely, it's a challenge, but it's also something that makes tutoring enjoyable, is making sure that you're hitting all the marks at the right time. I think that a tutor can really help with that.
Yeah. And for me, it will, what struck me very much what you're saying, it does depend a little bit on, you as the tutor try to suss out what it is the student does need. Like, am I being used as a crutch sometimes? And this is actually something that, this hypothetical test that I said coming up on Friday, is that something that the student
is not hypothetical?
No comment. But if that is something that little Timmy can actually do by himself, then I can say like, okay, yeah, you've got this now. Let's sort of spend time thinking about, okay, how are you going to get the contextualization point or something like that? or what does it mean? What other arguments can you craft in a long essay, for instance, for either the English language or, again, one of the histories? I keep coming back to the histories because it's what I do the most of. Yeah, it's I'm not unsympathetic to that balance. And so ultimately, to go back to this initial question, when should I start reviewing? If you want to strike a balance between both, I think the earlier the better. And this is normally the time when people who like to get a head start on this kind of thing will start doing so, especially if your schedule has the time to allow for it. What about a new question? My goodness, I can drone on for too long. Now you get a sense of how I tutor. I just pontificate for too much long. Again, thank you, Jesse, for the courtesy. Yeah. What are AP graders looking for? We hosted last year, I'm sure you can, we hosted a really, really interesting webinar where I actually, not to toot my horn, but I interviewed two graders on a sort of panel discussion. And it was fascinating. One was a grader for one of the physics, and one was a grader for one of the histories. And it was just an absolutely fascinating conversation. Like these people are literally, teachers, love what they do, and then, spend a lot of time thinking about these questions. They are flown in to some central part of the country. Like they talked about Kansas because it was a good meeting point for everybody coming from all parts of the country. Nobody had to fly for too long. So they all would congregate in Kansas into these giant conference centers, and they'd all be given these instructions. Okay, here were the questions, folks, and here's the kinds of things we're looking for. Like they really are sort of sat down, and then they will read hundreds of these responses. It's an incredible undertaking, because it's not just like a Scantron, like the SAT and the ACT, and then somebody has to look over and make sure that there was no mistakes, possibly. Like these are, people who really love the subject, love what they do. Certainly the two of them did, and they spoke incredibly highly of everybody else. But to give up their time after the school year has already ended to come and to do this, and then be given these sort of PowerPoint presentations, and then for them to consistently say, like, we love reading new essays. Like, yes, there are the sort of cookie cutter things that we're looking for, but even in sort of these free responses, there's plenty of opportunity for different interesting answers, well backed up answers, creativity, good writing. And certainly there are specifics, but I was sort of really, really struck by the human part that's going on behind the scenes that we don't necessarily get. So, now that so after peeking behind the curtain, I think that as well, the College Board can be very open about the kinds of things that they're interested in. Jesse, like, we'll tag team a little bit here. Like, what do you feel, especially for the STEM things, that the AP graders are looking for?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because you're right. I think there's a tendency to think about it in very cookie cutter ways, to think about it in terms of like, I need to check this point, I need to check this point, I need to check this point. And I find that that's immensely valuable to offer to students, to show them what scoring guidelines look like, to show them where their points are coming from, and to have a little bit where they're thinking about it as a point getting exercise is valuable, because that is, you want to make life easy for the grader. You want to make it something to where they can check the boxes and see that you are doing what you want to do. But the funny thing about it is, like, usually where it really comes together is when you have a student who is able to start conversing in the language of the subject that they're in. And this, the biggest one for this is AP Stats, because statisticians speak their own language. They have their own way of approaching things, their own way of describing data, their own way of making arguments, right? That at some points can seem diametrically opposed to the way that you're being told how to approach argumentation in an English class or a history class. The ability to show that you understand how to think and speak like a statistician, or think and speak like a chemist, or think and speak like a physicist. And this is not like in any grand sense. I mean, like a baby statistician, or a baby chemist, or a baby physicist. Like the goal, we shouldn't set the goals too high here, but that opportunity to, again, have that human element to where you're not just like hitting checks on a box that you would hope if they were graded by AI, the AI would be able to recognize, okay, they hit the points we wanted to, but that you're also communicating to the person on the other side of that curtain, like, I know what I'm talking about. And giving them an opportunity to where if you don't quite give them exactly what they were looking for, they maybe recognize like that was really close, and I'm going to give them credit in whatever way I can, because clearly this student has paid attention to what this course is all about. If you read through the guidelines that they offer each year, there's always like specific guidelines for the questions, but there's also like an overview of like, this is what our philosophy is this year. You will see time and time again College Board telling AP graders to like, we want to see that there's actual knowledge, that there's actual that these students are actually conversant in the things that we are working through. And so, you know, that's, you want to answer the question, you want to answer it fully, you want to be direct and concise, but you also want to put yourself in a position where you're giving all the possible opportunities to get all the points that you can from that grader, and maybe even impress them along the way, because they enjoy their jobs, they enjoy what they do.
Yeah. It's interesting you're talking about statistics graders, because I hear the average statistics grader is pretty mean. I'll move on. That's something that you are very, I think, correctly saying that I really want to latch onto, and I want to make sure people sort of understand from this. Again, sorry, I will talk much more from the humanities perspective, which necessarily does involve a lot more writing. But, you know, I know that there is that for some of the STEM ones, the chemistry questions. But like, I know that the chemistry ones can be like some of the history ones, where you will have to answer specifically worded questions. And my goodness, if there's one thing that I feel like I would love my students or anybody here to walk away with, one of the biggest things that I have to do when we are studying for that second part that I was talking about earlier, not the content, but how do I tackle the test? The biggest single thing for me is that students will not quite answer the question asked, and they will stray, or they will get, you know, something in the wording a little bit off. And remember, you have to go through and answer in a lot of cases, a question will have part A, part D, part F, and you need to be ultra specific with all of these. And it gives you even more of an opportunity to showcase what you know. Jesse is incredibly right and incredibly clever in what he is saying. This is an opportunity, this test, for you to showcase what you know. Write down as much as you can that will actually answer the question asked. Answer it. Give yourself the opportunity to answer it fully. And if it's multiple choice, make sure that you address all parts of the question asked. You can do that part where you demonstrate knowledge, but if you are asked for, evaluate the causes of something, or explain the connection, between two different historical points. And again, very commonly, a student will just explain what those two things were and not do that last, but extremely important step of connecting. And here's how the thread runs through A to B. That's, you're leaving points on the table. It's funny enough, not an easy exercise. You need to be able to, yes, recall information quickly, but make sure you are responding to that prompt. Make sure you are giving that answer that we're looking for. I do want to make sure that I'm leaving time for people's questions at the end, and I'm aware that we've got 12 minutes left. So, Jesse, is there anything else that you want to say on this topic?
I'll just say you're absolutely right. Like, this is where some good old fashioned like test strategy works. Like making sure you read the question, are marking it up, that you see what all the steps are logically in the question, and then making sure that you outline your response in a way kind of ahead of time to make sure that you're have structure before you start writing is a huge part of it. It's like, this is obvious, this is test taking 101, but it applies as much to APs as it does to PSATs, SATs, all the way up. So
yeah. Thank you for everybody who's listened to us this long and put up with some atrocious puns, especially on my part. So quick thing, we're gonna throw a poll up. We would just love to get a sense of who everybody is, what they came for, whether we are addressing your questions. You should see it now. So, quickly go through that, and we'll then get to the Q&A portion. But again, we absolutely love doing this. Again, these are the three pillars of what we do. Please do reach out to us if you feel like this has been helpful and you would like to go the extra step, you want some extra help on anything. Like, this is what we live and breathe. We're all here because we love to do this stuff. And so we would, and we'd absolutely love to give anybody that extra support that they might need for what is admittedly a very stressful time in young people's lives, is AP tests. Here's all the information that you would possibly need. There are private tutoring opportunities. There are group review sessions. So figure out what makes sense for you, and sign up as you will at appleruth.com/AP, or speak with a program advisor for any personalized advice. With that, I believe that brings us to our Q&A portion. So I've got these up here. So somebody asks, what if your school doesn't offer the class and you took it as dual enrollment, Mandarin 1-4, and you will have to self-study? I mean, this is a great question to ask. Like, what if your school doesn't offer the AP course in this, but you are trying to do this anyway? Like, I get that a lot for people who, oh, my school offers this history course, it's not AP specific, or I come from a foreign country and I've been speaking Spanish since I was a toddler. I want to take the AP Spanish language. Could I do that? Jesse, what do you think? What should be done here?
Well, this is one I might throw right back at you, because I do say that, like, this comes up so much with the language tests. For a lot of for anything that's more STEM related, I think it's tough. You can do it. Just be ready to go out and build a lot of resources and spend a lot of time preparing for it, because there is, like, the content base, as we've been saying this whole time, is only half of it, and the other half of it really does come back around to being comfortable with specifically what the curriculum looks like for AP, and also with what the AP exam looks like. But I mean, the languages are totally different, and I have very little experience there, so I'll let you kind of what your experience has been, Ian.
Yeah, I would say, I would ask the question, what is what is the goal behind taking an AP in a situation like that? Is it again to demonstrate to schools like, hey, this is something I am actually really really dedicated to continuing to study, be part of my academic life when I'm at college or university? Or is this oh, sneaky me, I can quickly get this score and get college credit out of it, and I can do that without a lot of studying? Good on you. I think that I think maybe still take it in that case, but don't expect that to be as impactful for colleges and universities. You might, if you went to study somewhere else, you took an English language test, that's not necessarily showcasing your academic prowess. Now, if all that's the case and you want to take it, especially if it's one of the other sort of academic courses, I think starting off with tutoring maybe now is, I say that as a tutor, I realize, but starting with somebody now who can really concentrate with you on the way in which the questions are asked. Because I feel like if somebody is taking an AP European, is taking European history honors or something, so it's not an AP specific class, again, it's those things of, do you know what's being asked of you on this test that we will go through? Yeah, so that's something. It's that, again, that second part that I would really, really emphasize trying to focus on in that case. Another question: are there any practice tests per units in AP College Board? Are there any practice tests per units? There are. Do you mean, are there questions? Is there an entire test devoted to one unit? No. Are there practice questions galore that you can find on every unit? Yeah, and it's great, and you can nerd out, and it's wonderful. It's and not only that. I'm so glad I got to this bit. Not only that, but you can find, for some select questions, sample responses for, hey, we gave this one a perfect score and here's why. We gave this one a middle score and here's why. We gave this one a low score and here's why. Like, you can see how each one of these were evaluated because they're real answers. That's pretty darn cool as well. Is that the case for the STEM ones as well?
So yeah, the sample responses are very valuable. Specific to this, so depending on what your teacher has done, you may be familiar, or your student may be familiar with AP Central. There is a set of sort of centralized resources that College Board is offering to help offer support to AP teachers and also help teachers and students have sort of content banks that are organized a little bit more per unit. Those are not immediately available to the public, but if your class has been registered and you're able to sign in as a student on AP Central, there are some sort of like resources that are available there that I've seen some students use in classes before, that are a little bit more organized by unit, and that you can kind of go like, well, wait a minute, how did I do on here? And you can do that. The way that we tend to do that in tutoring is that we'll use Barron's Guide or some other third-party book that then will have content-specific units that you can then take a little practice quiz and see how you do. But there are some things available per College Board. It's just usually you have to kind of be registered through the course, and unfortunately, as a third-party tutoring provider like ourselves, we don't necessarily have access to the back end of that, so we don't use it quite as often.
And there's another question that I'm going to pair these a little bit because my answer will be a little bit the same. So again, this last question was, are there any practice tests per units in AP College Board. And somebody else asked, do high school teachers give study guides, or does it depend on the class or teacher? So I think maybe that question especially is asking, like, are you up to the mercy of whatever the teacher gives you? You don't have to be. There are study guides that are freely available on the web. And again, like something that Jesse is saying about AP Central, like you can go on to collegeboard.org. You can, see their little homepage of college starts here and click on the upper left-hand corner, go to the AP Central bit, and you will see just amazing things on, again, this is what we were talking about. This is the handouts that the AP freely distributes to teachers so that they know how to plan their courses. Like the AP is very, very open about, here's what we expect students to be able to know, here's what we expect them to be able to do, here's what we're going to be evaluating you on. It's not as they're not trying to keep it a secret. So you can, feel free to go on and have a look as well. I thoroughly encourage you to do that, because it's this is, it's something that you can find very, very freely, and you don't have to be held to the whims of whatever teacher you have.
I totally agree. I mean, high school students, if they go and look, there's a ton of information out there. I just remembered, I'll give a plug for the AP YouTube channel. Does an amazing job having review sessions and AP like presentations as we get closer and closer to the AP test exam dates. And those are very often organized unit by unit, like what needs to be covered, what needs to, if I get this particular free response question, what should I look at? So again, like, start looking at it, start digging into those resources. They're available for free online. And then of course, if you choose to go the route of having tutoring and having assistance with that, that's something that we're familiar with as well and can help navigate too.
Jesse, I've got one more question for you, just to wind us down. I know we're in February, and May is a few weeks away, but is there anything that you like to tell your students towards the end about any stress mitigation? Like when you're coming up to a few days, even a few hours before the test, is there anything that you like to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, so again, I said it at the front and I'll say it again, that like colleges are admitting a person. They're not admitting one single test score or one single number, right? It's part of a holistic, it's part of a holistic evaluation of what you are, of who you are as a student, what you look like on paper. And no one test is going to make or break your experience. No one test is going to make you less valuable as a person, less valuable as a student, less valuable as an applicant. You get ready in the best way you can, and you prepare yourself the best way you can. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, you've got kind of a score range, and you're aiming for the top end of that score range. But there are times when you're gonna overperform. There's times you're gonna underperform. It happens, and these are one-offs. That's the weirdest thing about them. For SAT and ACT, you can retake it. For the APs, you can't really. So you prepare yourself the best way you can, but ultimately, you shoot your shot. You throw that dart at the dartboard. You see what score you get to the best of your ability, and then you move on, and that's okay. And that's something that is good and mature and valuable for students to realize, is you do the best you can. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. And so you are not any one thing. You are a multifaceted individual, and colleges want that. They don't want somebody who can only get a 5 on AP stats at the one thing they do, and they can do it every single time. That'd be a pretty boring campus. Instead, they want to have people who are well-rounded individuals who have lots of different things. And I mean, in a lot of ways, we talked about signaling at the beginning too. It's like, even just taking the class for an entire year and then putting forth the time and effort to take the exam, you've already signaled a lot to colleges about what's important to you and how mature you are as an individual. If the score ends up a point lower than you wanted it to, that's okay. And especially if it ends up a couple points lower, you can even talk about that. If you think it's something that you want to address in your college essay, then say, like, this is something I worked really hard for. It didn't turn out, but here's what I learned from that experience. Everything's an opportunity. And you just want to put yourself out there in the best way possible through that, but never feel like it lessens your value as an individual or puts you in a position where you feel like the stress and anxiety was too much. You do your best, and that's all you can do.
I don't think I can top that, so I won't. Folks, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. Please let us know if there's anything more that we can help you with, if there's anything that we can address. And with that, have a lovely, lovely evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.